Um, okay, we're being recorded. Well, again, welcome everybody. It's the Big Tent, and we are a group of mostly women, moderates. Maybe we lean one way or the other, but we try to find that middle ground of decency in America. We educate each other, and what we believe in is our democracy. And we believe in women's health, and we believe in the health of our planet. We believe in issues that are important to women, and we are trying to find that middle ground to keep us all active and involved and ready for the next round of elections. So thank you all for being here. And I wish we had another letter writing campaign for you, which we don't right now. As I was just saying, for those who are just plugging in, we're hoping to hear more about some opportunities perhaps today from our speakers. So because I think it feels good to stay active and feel like you're making a difference. And we love this activism piece of the Big Tent. Let me tell you about some upcoming events. So this is our Big Tent series, which we have in the mornings, noon. And then we have our spotlight speakers in the evening events. So they're less about activism, more about education. And I hope you'll tune into these. We have some good ones coming up. We have Wednesday, the 27th, which is pretty soon, of October, Nancy Northrup, the president and CEO of the Center for Reproductive Rights. And they are really on the cutting edge of a lot of political efforts going on today. So 7 p.m., Wednesday, the 27th. Now in November, we have Jennifer Rubin, who is a Washington Post columnist. And she's written a book about how women saved democracy from Donald Trump, which is a very interesting topic. And we like to think that we were a part of that. So that's on November 10th, and we look forward to that. And then in December 1st, we have Charlie Whelan, the founder of Unite America, which is an organization working toward better government. And all three of these speeches will be really wonderful, really interesting. 7 p.m. To find out more information about this, go to bigtentusa.org. That's our website. And Vanessa, who works on the website, is doing a tremendous job. All this information is there. Lots of good previous speeches you can tap into, lots of ideas and about who we are and how to be involved. So I encourage you all to go to bigtentusa.org in your free time. Next time you're sitting somewhere and you're bored on your phone and you don't know what to do, go to bigtentusa.org. And we will try to entertain you with important information.
Great.
Personally, my personal activism this last week has been changing my entire family plan from AT&T to Verizon. And that's just what I personally have done, because we have 6 lines. And when I found out that AT&T has been 90% supporting America, the One America network, which is right of Fox network. And I said, okay, that's it, we're gone. And so they had to say goodbye to 6 of our phone lines, and a nasty letter to Mr. CEO Stanky. Chairman Stanky heard from me this week. So anyway, I tell you this because it's good to take these things into our own hands in ways that we can, in small ways that can make a difference. Collectively, we can do big things. So that's what I wanted to say about AT and Texas and our wonderful website and upcoming wonderful events. So we have a lot going on, even though we are in sort of an interim phase right now. You know, I think starting in January, we'll start to hear a lot more about the following November elections coming up. And it's important for us all to realize that these are very important. You know, I think we all felt like the big one was last November, and we all made a difference. And I think the next one, there are many ways that this is almost as important as that, and that we should really all be actively engaged in doing what we can. So thank you all for being here. I love that we have so many of you here, and so many familiar faces, some new faces. It's really good to see you all. Okay, so I am now going to turn over the microphone for you to hear about our speaker today. We're very excited. So Vanessa, would you like to take it away?
Yes, thank you so much, Karen. And we have Emiliana here. I don't see her video on, but I know she's here. Thank you, Karen, so much. It's such an honor to welcome Emiliana Guereca, also known as Emmy, under the tent, who has been a great friend, supporter, and partner to Big Tent. Many of you may remember, or some of you here may remember, back in late 2019, doing a really fun text banking sessions ahead of the 2020 election, led by the Women's March Action Team. They have an incredible community of women, and I know personally for me, it has been, it was such a great inspiration, and it's continuing to inspire me to keep going and do more in terms of advocacy work. So definitely a favorite organization of Big Tent and of mine personally as well. So a little bit more about Emiliana. Emiliana is an activist, feminist, entrepreneur, and CEO of Women's March Foundation, which she founded in 2016. She is the driving force behind the 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and the most recent 2021 official women's marches in Los Angeles. Emiliana devotes much of her time to advocacy programs for women's rights, Latino education, and gender equality, and has served as the bridge between community organizations and coalition building that spans national levels. Emiliana's most recent endeavor includes launching Women's March Action, the 501c4 political arm of Women's March. Personally, Emiliana is proud to serve her Latin community and has also built roots in the Jewish community as she raises her family in the Jewish faith. Emiliana has been awarded the National Women's Political Caucus 2019 Women of Courage Award, the State of California's Pioneer Women of 2017 Award, the Hope Latina of the Year Award in 2017, LA County, the Pioneer Women of 2018, and the Pat Brown Institute Civic Engagement Award in 2018 and 2019. And lastly, the Reed Award for Best Latinx Strategist. So that is, wow, that is quite, a lot of accomplishments. So congratulations, Emiliana. It's great to have you here. I will now go ahead and turn it over to you. If you can all please put your questions for Emiliana in the chat. We will as usual, we'll have a Q&A session after about 20 or so minutes. And so please put your questions in the chat. I will also put on the live transcript button, enable that. So at the bottom, you'll be able to see the live transcript. So thank you so much and welcome, Emiliana.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I am Emiliana Guereca, also known as Emmy. Most people know me as Emmy. I am an activist. I am what people call a new activist. I'd like to think I'm not that new at it. Yes, I'm more known for Women's March, but I've really been advocating and on this path to social justice since I was a kid. I came to the United States and I'm going to say brought by my parents to the United States as a kid. I am one of 13 kids. Yes, one of 13. My dad likes to say that our family doesn't do anything small. So that I was ready for Women's March. But so I'm one of 13 kids. I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in Chicago in Cabrini Green, south side of Los Angeles, what most people considered the ghetto. But that was my first experience being in the United States. I didn't consider it the ghetto. I considered it my community. And even to this day, I was like, what was so wrong with living here? But realistically, what I experienced in Chicago was that I was, and this is so typical for women, and you may all think about this, but I wasn't Latina enough. I wasn't Puerto Rican because that's what was in Chicago. I wasn't Nicaraguan because that was what Latino meant in Chicago. I was Mexican, and most folks thought I was on vacation. We were not on vacation. So I grew up in Chicago, really in Black culture. And to me, that's what the United States was. That was my first experience. And it wasn't until I was about 12 or 13 when we wanted to move out of that neighborhood that I realized that that wasn't really what the United States looked like, because we were unable to move into different housing. So my first initial fight was fighting for housing rights at 12, 13. My parents didn't speak English. And so we would end up translating, you know, for landlords or whatnot. We didn't know it at the time, but it was called redlining. And so that was our initial biggest fight. We moved out of the neighborhood. You know, I continued in Chicago. I am the first of in my family to attend university, but everyone after that. So it's always that one person. And my sister said, well, you couldn't get it wrong. Well, there's a lot of stuff you can get wrong, because when you're the first, there are no rules for you. Right. So although that may be difficult, but for me, I took it as I get to make up the rules. So I attended DePaul for 2 years, was sick and tired of Chicago cold weather, and moved to Los Angeles to finish at UCLA. So again, like for me, being that first, you get to make a lot of the rules. So I'm proud of that. I know that most women are like, well, if you're the first, and no, you get to make the rules. That's our power. So that's where I come from in Chicago. I am an entrepreneur. My first business was at 18, hence being able to move out to Los Angeles and not consider myself poor. I didn't. I drove to Los Angeles with $200 in my pocket, my cat, and my Altima. Yes, my cat was in the car. You know, so and then in Los Angeles, I started a restaurant group. I bought the restaurant where I waited tables, went back because I was just so attached to it, and then eventually started an event production company. And someone said, well, when did you find your purpose? When did you find your purpose of fighting for women's rights? I think I always had it. I worked in a really male dominant space, which is the restaurant business, as well as event production. And so my goal was always to bring women into the room. You know, when you're producing an event, I've produced events like Coachella, big music festivals and concerts. And the biggest thing is always, there's no women. We don't hire them because there's no women. No, you can't get a contract until you have vetted women for the production crew. Sure enough, a week later, they found women, right? There are production crews with women. So I've always advocated for women in the workplace, for equity in the workplace. So I've always had that, I just didn't know it. Part of it also is because I grew up in a family where men came first. I'm, very traditional Latina family where even the men ate dinner first, right? And then if there was leftovers, we would eat. But I didn't think about that. But I thought about it early on. I remember 15, 16. And my dad says the story didn't go this way, but the story went this way. So in our household, mom had 7 girls and 5 boys, and the boys would go out to help dad on the weekends, landscape. And we would stay home and make sure there was laundry, cook, get ready for the week. The boys would get money. Dad would pay them for the weekend work, but the girls did not get paid. And so one Sunday, I said, I'm not cleaning until everybody agrees to pay me. I'm 15. And dad says, pay you? Yes. I need half of what everybody is making. Argument. Anyway, I ended up walking away with $10 every weekend after that big fight. And dad says, it's not fair. I said, no, they get paid and I don't. And so dad then says to me, we named you after Emiliano Zapata. You were supposed to be a boy. This is why you fight with us all the time. And it wasn't because I was supposed to be a boy. It was because I thought as a woman, I should be given the same treatment and the same amount of money. So ever since then, every weekend, the girls, we got an allowance. We split half with the boys for that housework that was supposed to be unpaid, as Dad called it. So I've been advocating for that equity piece ever since I could remember. And I had someone just ask me yesterday in an interview, what's a Latina doing fighting for women's rights? Shouldn't you be fighting for immigration? Well, there's a lot of issues we should be fighting for, but women are still not equal here or in other countries. So men are not fighting for us, right? So why can't I do that? And so going through that piece is always, I think, a little more difficult to explain to people, because the big thing to everyone is you should be fighting for immigrants' rights. Well, I'm doing that too. But as a woman, I need to make sure that every single young girl is represented, and where in the political world, because when we see ourselves in power, when we see ourselves in office, then we can see our future brighter. We're 51% of the population, yet have really no representation when we look at it. I remember, if anybody remembers the 2016 election, which we're all still reeling from because the after effects are still here. I remember specifically being in a room and someone saying, there's no way Hillary's going to get elected. I said, why? I'm out here in my pantsuit. I'm like ready to go. I had a purple pantsuit ready to go. And she said, we do not see a woman in that position. We cannot even visualize a woman in that position. And these were women on a board. These were really powerful women in that room. And so at that point, I thought, wait a second. If women can't visualize ourselves in that room, how are men supposed to visualize us in that room, right? And so this was early on. And so, as we looked at it, we could see what was happening. She got hit with sexism. She got hit with everything in the book, and it had to do based on sex. So this is where I started to organize the Women's March in Los Angeles the day after the election. The day after the election, I have permits that I submitted to the city of Los Angeles to march in tandem with the DC March that had put through something on Facebook, which was Teresa Shook from Hawaii at the time. But I knew that women were going to be in trouble, because we had already accepted that the rhetoric that was set forth by Trump was okay. Really, media was completely showing that rhetoric. No one stood up for women. Could you imagine a male candidate being on a podium next to another male candidate and someone stalking him? The behavior that we accepted from a male towards Hillary is the behavior that is prevalent in this society for women. And so this is where I decided we were going to march, but also I thought I was going to after the march, I was going to go back. I was going to go back to my normal life of event production. I was going to be fine. We weren't fine. I had to continue, but I also wanted to do more. And so this is where I started the Women's March Action, which is the political arm, the 501c4. The 501c3 is advocacy, but I needed to do more. Why? Because I'm in Los Angeles, and even in the progressive state of California and Los Angeles, we could not find enough female politicians to speak on our stage. We could not find, the city council person was one woman, Nira Martinez. Where are the rest? And so we were shocked to find that women did not get support, something we knew, but really upon the inviting of women to take the stage, it became fewer and fewer women with power. But I have emails of all the men that were ready to open the program, to speak, to make sure that they were at the forefront, right? And so we needed to make sure that that was not what was going to happen moving forward. So that is the 501c4 and Women's March Action. We've engaged since 2018. We have engaged women at all levels, from Missouri to New York to Texas. We have engaged in programs that women have never seen specifically a spend on them. When we talk to the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they take our vote for granted. Women are going to show up to vote for us anyway. Make them work for that vote. Make them tell you that they are pro-choice. Make them advocate for you, right? Where do they stand on family leave? Where do they stand on reproductive rights? And so that is where our 501c4 and Women's March Action comes through. And someone said, you don't have enough experience to run a political organization. I have enough experience to know I'm not equal. And I have enough experience to know that the folks in office right now do not represent my best interest. As a woman, I can add the layers of Latina, Jewish later on, but as a woman, I'm still not equal. And so that's where Women's March Action comes from. We are still engaging in a lot of work. 2022 is going to be even more difficult than 2020, because even folks within the Democratic Party and Republican Party are still not convinced. Some folks are still not convinced that Mr. Trump will not run again. So 2022, moving into 2024 will be a big fight, and women are going to get it done again, because that's who came out in 2020. I'm also going to talk about Texas. I think if you joined a march on October 2nd, thank you. I see a few shirts. Thank you. That was our biggest fundraiser. That is how we fundraise for this march. We are continuing the fight for reproductive rights in Texas. We are engaging in a postcarding program for businesses in Texas. And I heard Karen talk about her AT&T phone. I too defunded AT&T this week. I moved into Verizon. But more than that, we are starting a postcard program to over 200 businesses in Texas, asking them, where do they stand on women's rights? How are they supporting women in their workplace? And I'm going to name off a few companies, the top one being Tesla. Mr. Musk is moving from California to Texas to go willy-nilly out there. We're not going to let him. So Tesla is on our top list. AT&T, Exxon, Dell is out there. Dave & Buster's, Chuck E. Cheese's, Mary Kay. We are going to postcard to these folks and ask them, where do they stand? We will run a PR campaign to these folks. But then on top of that, we are also working on a feminist street initiative where we want to get a street name for Roe versus Wade in Texas. We are going to have to go all in so that they know not to mess with women. And these corporations need to respond to where they stand with women. Where are they spending their dollars, and how are they supporting women in the workplace? So that should be ready October 28th. We've listed over 200 organizations that we are going to ask to be accountable. Not only that, we are going to embark on continuing to protest. We are continuing to protest on December 1st at the Supreme Court. We will continue this fight because this is not going to go away. Florida is now part of this. Mississippi is now part of this. So we all must work on codifying Roe v. Wade first, but we need to continue the pressure in all the states and definitely Supreme Court. So that is where we are at. We will continue to text. test as well for the 2022 midterms as well. So we will look at female candidates. We are currently, our political advisor is helping us identify viable candidates. And I'm going to say that all women are viable candidates, even if they don't win. The fact that they can go out there and say, I'm going to run is critical. It's critical. I just had someone say, well, why are women running all the time, even if they don't win? That's never asked of men. We run because we can. We run because unless we continue to be at the forefront, we are not going to be represented, right? And we may not win the first time, and that's fine. But the fact that we can continue to bring in more women is critical. We went all in on Amy McGrath in Kentucky, and someone said, why? She was not viable. Why was she not viable? She was viable, right? So not only that, she continues to do the work in Kentucky. Look at Stacey Abrams in Georgia. She didn't win her election. She's a force. She turned Georgia. So just because they don't win an election doesn't mean we stop supporting women. That is not what we do for men, nor is that what we should do for women. Don't hold them to a higher standard. Hold them to an equal standard. So that's asking. I will take questions. Yes, Tesla's building in Austin, Texas, but we can still hold them accountable there. I will take questions. I'm Emiliana Guereca, also known as Emmy. Anything you can want to ask me, I'm open. Oh, besos, yes. Someone's asking me, do you speak Spanish? Yes, I am fluent in Spanish. I actually think in Spanish. That's why I have to translate.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Emiliana. So yes, everybody, please put your questions in the chat. So one question that we had that came in is, could you maybe give us a a success story or two about how Women's March Action has grown and what you're most proud of? Success stories. So to me, a success story is really the coalition work. Women's March Action really, we started on our own, really grassroots, and we had this idea that we needed a political arm. In all honesty, we were waiting for Women's March Inc. in DC. We're two separate organizations to do a lot of that political work, which we thought needed to happen beyond marching. And so we sort of got tired of waiting. So we coordinated, but this was a coalition partner that came in to work with us, Women's March Inc. and a lot of the women's groups coming in to help us. I think that was critical for our success. And the support we received, I also did not realize how difficult it was to fund a women's organization, because the big thing is it's never been done. Well, it's never been done because you've never supported it. Give me your $5 Starbucks money and we're gonna get it done. But I just wouldn't accept it's never been done. There is no women's organization that is just reaching out to women. You are missing half the population. Well, we've been missed the whole time. No one's really advocating just for women, although Planned Parenthood is, but the key there is reproductive rights. There are so many issues that affect women. Well, Sierra Club, well, that's climate. How does that affect women? Sure, but there is no one out there that is fighting the political fight every day for women to be represented. And I don't buy it's never been done and you shouldn't do it. Great. Yeah, another great question from Susan. How do you handle the messaging in Texas? It seems as if people don't know about the $10,000 bounty. We've heard that it's not, a lot of people are just not aware of it. And yeah. We don't want them to be aware of it, honestly. So because that's even worse. I think the messaging in Texas is really about
family values, when people talk about family values, they really talk about controlling women. So it's really talking through that reproductive rights, abortion is healthcare. Most people don't even know this, but there is no word in Spanish for miscarriage. There is no word in Spanish for miscarriage. It is automatically aborto, right? It's abortion. And so we need to destigmatize that. We need to tell our stories about abortion as being healthcare. I also always talk about my mom. Remember I said I'm one of 13 kids? The only healthcare we had was my mom going to Planned Parenthood, making sure that she was getting a pap smear, making sure that she had some type of healthcare. Because when you live in poverty, you don't have healthcare. We did not. And so really talking through what that looks like, because most people do not understand that some of these clinics are the only healthcare these women are getting. And so talking through that in Texas is critical. We are working with different groups in Texas, but we're also working with outside groups that see women. We just touched base with Planned Parenthood, who has the Roe Project opening up, which will have funding for women in Texas to leave the state and fund healthcare for them, by whether it's an abortion or other healthcare, but they will fund that. So we are working in coalitions. That's one of our biggest strengths. And I think that comes from me having that big family where we had to get along no matter who was not happy. We needed to make sure that we stayed on mission. And so this is what we're doing. We build coalitions and we help partners throughout. And so the Texas conversation is really talking about abortion as healthcare and destigmatizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking of coalitions, can you talk a little bit about, I know you mentioned Planned Parenthood. Are there other groups, that you're working with in Texas? And, who are they?
So we're working with other groups in Texas. We're working with the Southwest Border Project as well, which is specifically Latinos, because in Texas, we know that this ban really affects Latina women and Black women the most. So we're working with the Southwest Border Project. We're working with Trust Women, which is outside of Texas, but will fund, and definitely Planned Parenthood with the new Roe Project.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. And then another question that came in, besides protecting choice and promoting paid family leave, what are your other sort of non-negotiable issues for candidates you support?
So definitely pro-choice, paid leave. I also think we need to talk about really, really equal pay. Where do they stand on that? But also leadership in women. When you talk about candidates, and you ask who is in their teams, you're going to find that very few hire a lot of women, very few. In the 2020 presidential, all of the female candidates had a lot of female staff. Kudos to Warren, her staff was phenomenal, right? Diverse, everything intergenerational, what you want to see in someone's office. And so I think that you need to really talk through equity for women for these candidates and look at their team. I mean, we had a candidate, not going to mention names, but we had a candidate running for Congress in California. And when you looked at their team, and they did not do well with the Latino vote, and you looked at their team and you said, okay, who is reaching out for the Latino vote from your team? We were. You need to look at what their team looks like and how you are pulling those voters in. So I think those are not negotiable. When you have a candidate that says they stand for women's rights and are not hiring women, where are we? Yeah. Also, kudos to the other person was Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg met with us. And really his entire team was diverse. You are talking about women from different ages, different colors, races. His team really again represented. So for me, who stood out was Warren, Pete, and Kamala Harris. So talking through that and not just saying, okay, those are your values, but when you look at their team, you can see that their values are not there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more. Another question, how are you thinking about other states passing abortion laws? And is there any work underway? As we know, it's spreading beyond Texas. And are there any campaigns that you're going to be working on?
So we will be working with campaigns definitely in Florida, which in 2020, I was like, Florida's a lost cause, but it can't be a lost cause. For Florida needs our help. So I think Florida is a state that we will be helping. We do see other states working on laws like this. But I think more than anything for us, we have to stick to big picture and help those partners that need help. We're mobilizers. We have a huge microphone and we don't take that for granted. So what we do is make sure that if there are states ready to mobilize, that we amplify, that we support as much as possible with whatever our resources are, because I truly believe that that's a woman's strength. That's our strength.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Another great question from John Cooper. Similar to the gun violence prevention movement with over 100 national organizations, how can women's organizations stay connected and coordinated in this work? And he's thinking in particular of Supermajority and Women's March, both of which he supports.
So Supermajority, we've worked with closely. We do have different campaigns, and there are conversations in the background where we do work closely. As coalition partners, we're not always going to agree on the messaging or how we do it. For example, for October 2nd, we were in Women's March Action in Los Angeles did not want to call it defund abortion. We wanted to call it reproductive rights, March for Reproductive Rights, because it is more than just abortion. And putting forward the just abortion turns some people off because they're not willing to go past that first page. So we still worked with Women's March Inc., with Supermajority, with NARAL, with Planned Parenthood, to make sure that at October 2nd was what we wanted it to be, but to make sure that we were also respectful of different cultures who are not going to even participate as soon as they see the word abortion. So coalition work is critical, but also being respectful of the different entities that come in as partners. We still work with Supermajority. We work with a lot of organizations that we don't see at the forefront, but we're on calls all week long to make sure that the fight continues.
Great. And then another question, are you worried that Trump made inroads with Latino voters, particularly men, in 2020? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Trump made real inroads with the Latino community based on the misogyny, based on the feel of loss of power. As a matter of fact, just working on the California recall was really another issue that Larry Elder really got Latino voters on their side. So what we did as Women's March Action to combat that was that we participated and put together town halls specifically for families, and not just said women, although women are really the head of the voting engagement in Latino communities. What we did was we put familial town halls. And so what we did was talk through what a recall would look like, what a Republican administration would look like for Latinos. And so then the conversation is bigger. What Trump really did was start really a race war in the Latino community. what he did when he talked about, the Black Lives Matter movement is this, and he was the law and order president. What he did was ignite that fear that Latinos were not going to be represented unless there was law and order, right? And that you were not a macho if you voted for a woman. This was the disinformation that was out there on social media. And this was also the disinformation campaign that it happened for the COVID vaccine. So really what we need to work on for the Latino vote, with that in mind, is that we need to make sure that the disinformation campaigns stop early on. We need to make sure that the Latino communities across the country, which will be the biggest voting bloc moving into 2024, 2022. So we need to make sure that disinformation doesn't happen, but we also need to make sure that we have boots on the ground for them, that we continue follow up, because the Latino vote is the youngest vote. Most folks are first generation voters. Their parents have not voted, their grandparents have not voted. So we know, what do we know about youth? They get their information from online, on their phones. Even if you're registering them to vote, their information comes from social media. So that is how we need to move into 2022 and 2024, which are the digital campaigns.
Excellent. And then another question that I had was, can you talk a little bit about the October Women's March? Did you, have you met with the other Women's March groups, and what was the turnout like across the country? Any lessons learned, as compared to previous marches?
Oh, this one was, I'm going to say that we put it together in about 15 days. Most people don't know that. We put it together in about 15 days based on bringing in the coalition partners, bringing in a group of 90 organizations that want to do different things, but have to, still focus on the mission of women's rights and reproductive rights. Was not easy. But on top of that, we're under COVID. On top of that, we have women that are really afraid to be congregating in huge groups. What did work was that we had over 500 marches across the country. What was really obvious was that media missed reporting on it. I don't know if anybody noticed this. There were more reports on William Shatner going up to space than millions of women taking to the streets for reproductive rights. So I'm currently writing an op-ed about that, because I had a reporter even talk to me about, I'm gonna interview you, but can you not use the abortion word? We're going to use the abortion word as healthcare. If you cannot interview us on that, then we don't have anything to talk about. The realistic part is that the media shied away from this particular march because it was controversial. So realistically, it's another form of silencing women. It's another form of silencing women. So the lessons learned for this was really continuing to put forth a social media presence for the women's movement. It's critical. We know folks get their news from that, and we know that the major media partners are afraid of really putting forth the message that needs to be put out. They're okay with the laws being passed and not talking about it. They're okay with suppressing women's voices because they're taking to the streets. So yeah. I'm doubling down on social media.
Yeah, I think that's smart. Another question that came in from Emily, what outlets are driving misinformation in the Latino community?
I think there's a lot of misinformation in the Latino community, specifically around voting time. I know in California, they sent out stuff of you need to show up to vote in this state, which wasn't true. You needed to mail your ballot. There was disinformation on the COVID vaccine. There was disinformation as phone calls being made to homes, phone banking, because it is a new voter. I'm going to ask you who you're going to vote for. You've already voted. You don't have to show up. So there's a lot of voter suppression. Yes, you would get a phone call that would ask you, are you voting yes or no on the recall? And you would say yes or no. You have voted. Thank you. So these young voters believed that they had voted. And so not realizing that. And then there's also the disinformation when you have the new voting machines like they do in California, they do in Illinois as well, of the QR code. If you do not bring in the QR code, you have not voted. So there's a lot of, I think we need to engage in mock voting. I think schools must engage in mock voting. What does voting look like in your state, in your county? And let's do a mock vote. And you will be surprised as to how many people think, don't know how voting happens. Youth just doesn't know. You get registered to vote. Has anybody taught any of us to vote? Nope. You register and we show up and we were in a little box like this and we have no clue. I remember the first time I voted, I almost cried. I was like, my little paper didn't align and I was, so I do think we need to engage in mock voting. What does it look like? What does down ballot look like? Because it's critical that we know who's represented us locally, but that's not where we show up. So I think we do need to engage in civic engagement as far as mock voting in high school and then first year of college, because we know that when you start voting as a young voter, you continue to be a voter.
Yeah, and we had another question in here. Are the voting shenanigans investigated and prosecuted in your experience?
I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say not enough. I don't think the states have the resources. I'm even shocked that they're still engaging in the shenanigans of 2020 of still trying to count votes for a 2020 election that's already been decided. I don't think they have the resources. I also think that we as citizens do not hear about all the shenanigans that go on. I mean, we had in Missouri as well as in California, we had folks set ballot boxes on fire, right? So that we are talking about really, really serious stuff. And I think in 2022, 2024, we're going to see more of it, more of voter suppression tactics, whether it's intimidation, voter disinformation. I don't think we prosecute. I really don't. I also don't think there's a lot of voter fraud, but there are more tactics being deployed. I just mentioned to Vanessa and Karen earlier that we were registering voters in Kansas when we received a cease and desist as an organization. We are no longer allowed to register voters. League of Women Voters received a cease and desist, as well as Women's March Foundation, our C3 arm. So Kansas is saying, we'll take care of handling voter registration when we know they're not. So if other states starts to enact that, we're gonna have issues because the states do not have the resources to really register all the voters. If we did, we would have higher voter registration. There is no money for civic engagement. The stats are that we spend 0.05 cents on civic engagement and 50 cents on STEM per student across the country. So it's another voter suppression tactic.
Thank you so much, Emiliana. And I guess just to sort of round this out, what can we do to help you? I mean, you've given us a lot of ideas. We're really excited to get going on the postcarding program. What else can we do to support you? And I am going to plug that by saying I'm putting a link for to ask for donations to donate to your organization. So
Always, thank you.
Yes.
Always.
Yes. But yes, what else can we do to help support? You've been such a great partner, and we love working with you. So, you know, we're all in this fight with you.
Absolutely. So always, yes, of course, donations, but more than anything, I know everyone here is across the country in different places. Let's identify women where you're at. Let's identify women that are running, that you say, hey, so-and-so is running in here. We need to make sure women run for school board, for city council, because you don't get to be mayor, you don't get to be governor unless you have all of these other steps. I don't think anybody ever told me you should run for school board. You should run for city council, right? But those are the stepping stones for women. So I would say more than anything, how you can help is identify women in your county, in your state, in your city that are running. Send me an email and say, hey, so-and-so is running. Let's support women. Even if we can raise $50 for them, that's $50 more than they had, right? I mean, in 2020, we supported a lot of women that didn't make it. I'm thinking the Abby Broyles, who missed it by a few marks, and now she's running for Congress. The fact that we supported her, she's back, right? We don't get the Katie Porters unless we support them early on. We don't get the Alejandra Ocasios unless we say, yeah, she's young, but let's support her. Let's vote for her, right? Because eventually she's gonna have the experience we need. So I'm gonna say really, really identify women that are in your city, state, county, and let's start funding them earlier. Let's start, especially for the parents, I'm looking at you. Every time I show up for a PTA meeting, I'm like, oh, that woman could be president. Let's put her on the school board. Let's put her on the city council. And really, that's what we need. We need all of us identifying. Has anybody here been on a PTA? Those women are powerful. I mean, and what they do with zero funding, they're ready for office as far as I'm concerned. So that's what I would say. Support women, identify them. Let's get them to run, ask women to run. It takes a woman to run being asked 7 times. So up today, I'm gonna ask all of you your first time, please run for something. Thank you.
Excellent. And then just one point of, there was a question in here quickly from John Cooper. In terms of the need for Women's March Foundation or Women's March Action, the C3 versus the C4 side, you know, where is the most need?
So I would say the C4 side does well. The C3 side, I am embarking on a really large mission on a feminist street initiative for the C3. What does that look like? It looks like a street being named after RBG for New York, a Dolores Huerta Street for California, Maya Angelou for Missouri, Judy Chicago for Chicago, because we are also missing in street names. We are less than 1% of street names. They name them after politicians, men. So the C3 is really embarking on this feminist street initiative, because when I'm 90 or 100, they're gonna say, what did you do? I made sure that women had equity on the streets as well.
Excellent. Oh, Emiliana, thank you so much. We're gonna go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, thank you so much for coming, and please don't forget to sign up for Center for Reproductive